3:14 in the morning. Julian Hargrove was sitting on the floor of his own office. Not in his chair, on the floor, back against the mahogany desk, laptop balanced on his knees, tie loosened, jacket somewhere he couldn't remember, surrounded by 17 printed spreadsheets that were all telling him the same useless story. $3 million was missing, or rather, $3 million had never existed where it was supposed to exist. And in 5 hours and 46 minutes, the auditors from Crestview Capital would arrive on the 14th floor of the Hargrove Grand to review the quarterly procurement reports before releasing a $40 million renovation investment. Julian had spent the last 9 hours trying to find it. His CFO had gone home at midnight with a headache and a fistful of aspirin. The accounting team had been released at 1 in the morning when it became clear that staring at the same numbers for 5 hours didn't change them. Only Julian remained, because that was what you did when you were CEO of a hotel group with 6 properties across the Midwest and a discrepancy the size of a luxury penthouse renovation sitting inside your linen procurement ledger. He had just closed his eyes for 30 seconds, not sleeping, just resting them from the screen glare, when he heard it. Typing. Not the soft, uncertain kind, fast, rhythmic, the kind of typing that had somewhere to be. It was coming from the executive conference room down the hall. Julian got up slowly, picked up his phone, considered calling security. Decide against it because if someone had broken into the conference room of a luxury hotel, calling security first would deprive him of the one moment of genuine excitement he'd had in 3 months of 12-hour days. He walked down the hallway in his socked feet. The conference room door was slightly open. Blue-white light bled through the gap. Julian pushed the door open. Willa Bauer was sitting at the head of the conference table, his chair, technically, in a gray hotel uniform, dark hair pulled up with what appeared to be a hotel pen she'd borrowed from her own cart, fingers moving across the keyboard of the CFO's laptop as if she'd been doing it her entire life. She didn't look up. "1 second," she said. Julian stood in the doorway. "Excuse me?" "1 second." She held up a single finger without breaking her focus on the screen. "I'm almost." She hit enter, exhaled, leaned back, then and only then looked at him. She looked at the pajama shirt he was wearing under his open dress shirt, then at his face, then back at the screen. "The linen procurement account," she said. "Someone's been double billing vendor invoices since February. Same invoices, 2 slightly different company names, Whitmore Supply Co. and Whitmore Supply Company. The system treated them as separate vendors. $3,214,000 went to the second one." She paused. "The second one doesn't exist. I checked the business registration." Julian did not move for a full 5 seconds. Then, "Who are you?" "Willa Bauer, night housekeeping, floors 12 through 16. She stood up, smoothed down her uniform. "The cart's in the hallway. I was cleaning the glass on the conference room door and I saw the spreadsheet open on the screen." She pointed at the glass panel beside the door. "The number was wrong. I could see it from out there." You could see a spreadsheet error through a glass panel from the hallway. The font was large. She tilted her head, and the vendor total didn't match the line items. They were off by exactly the discrepancy, which made me think it wasn't a random error. Random errors are messier. This one was too clean. Julian looked at the screen, then at her, then at the screen again. "You're a housekeeper." "Yes." "And you?" "I know." She picked up her cleaning cloth from the table. She'd apparently been wiping down the conference chairs while running the audit, and tucked it into her pocket. "I'll go. I just couldn't leave it." "Couldn't leave what?" She gestured vaguely at the laptop, at the spreadsheet, at the entire $3 million problem sitting quietly in the dark. "Broken things. I can't walk past them." She said it the way someone might confess to a minor personality flaw, like being bad at parallel parking. "It's a problem. My sister says I need therapy, but it's cheaper to just fix things." Julian let out a sound. Not quite a laugh, not quite not a laugh. "Okay," he said finally, "don't go. Tomorrow at 8, I need you to come back here and explain every step of what you just did." Willa looked at him with the particular expression of someone calculating risk. "I'm not going to lose my job." "You're not going to lose your job." She studied him for another moment. "You're the owner." "CEO, but close enough." "Okay." She picked up the cleaning cloth again. "The conference room still needs the north side tables. Is that all right, or?" "The conference room is fine." She nodded and got back to work, wiping down the tables in a methodical grid pattern. while Julian stood there holding his phone, looking at the spreadsheet that had just corrected itself, courtesy of a woman from the night cleaning shift. He went back to his office, sat down, looked at his own reflection in the dark window. $3 million, he said to no one, found by a housekeeper at 3 a.m, with a cleaning cloth in her pocket. He didn't sleep. At 8 the next morning, Julian was in the conference room in a fresh suit, 2 coffees on the table, one his, one he'd guessed on, when Willa arrived. She'd traded the hotel uniform for jeans and a plain navy sweater. Hair down now, she looked in the unforgiving morning light like someone who had also not slept. She sat down, wrapped both hands around the coffee, took a long sip and said, "You look worse than I do, and I work nights." "Thank you." Julian opened his folder. "Tell me how you knew." So she told him. She'd worked at the Hargrove Grand for 6 years, starting as a room attendant, moving to night housekeeping supervisor last year. She spent her nights moving through spaces that other people had left in disorder, resetting them to something correct and clean. She noticed numbers the same way. Not because she'd been trained to, but because she'd grown up doing the household accounting for her family after her dad got sick, tracking every expense in a spiral notebook her mother kept in the kitchen drawer. She'd taken 4 online accounting courses over the past 2 years. She tracked the hotel's supply deliveries against the invoice logs she saw on the break room bulletin board. Not from access she was given, but because the procurement manager printed the weekly summaries and left them on the shared printer, and Willa always returned the copy she'd accidentally picked up, but not before she'd read them. "It's not something I chose," she said, looking faintly embarrassed. "It's like, you know when you're talking to someone and their collar is flipped up on one side and you have to physically stop yourself from fixing it?" "Yes. It's like that, but with numbers." She wrapped her hands around the mug again. "Bishit numbers have a feeling, like a splinter. The double billing felt like 2 splinters in the same spot, which is worse." Julian looked at her for a moment. "Do you want a different job?" Willa blinked. "I want to not lose the job I have." "I'm not firing you. I'm asking if you want a different one." She set the mug down carefully. "Let me think about that." Julian nodded and wrote something in his folder. She'd noticed he wrote in straight, neat lines, like he'd been trained to fill spaces evenly. She thought that was interesting. By 10 o'clock, Willa was back on the floor with her cart, and the story had already begun to move through the hotel the way all hotel stories did, in fragments between floors, picked up by whoever happened to be in the service elevator at the right time. She was restocking the linen closet on 14 when 2 of the front desk associates walked past. "She literally just sat down at the CFO's laptop," one of them said, "like she owns the place." "Who does she think she is?" The second one laughed. "What, she found a typo. Anyone could do that." Willa counted towels, bath hand, face, bath hand, perfect. She didn't say anything. But when she pushed the cart past the doorway, she said, loud enough to land without shouting, "It wasn't a typo, it was a $3 million shell company. But yes, technically anyone could have found it. Nobody did, though." She kept walking. "Have a good morning." Dominic Frey found Julian at noon. He was VP of Operations, the kind of man who made his presence felt in a room before he entered it, because he scheduled that too. Early 50s, silver-haired, the permanent expression of someone who found most things slightly beneath them. He closed Julian's office door. "We need to talk about the housekeeper." Julian looked up from his laptop. "What about her?" "She accessed the CFO's computer without authorization. She accessed our procurement records without authorization." Dominic sat down without being asked. "This is a serious breach of protocol, Julian. She could have planted those records herself." Julian leaned back. "Why would she do that?" Dominic smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. It never did. To look like a hero, to get noticed, to get promoted. He spread his hands. "People do unusual things when they want something they know they can't normally get. I'm not saying she's criminal. I'm saying she created an opportunity and used it, and we don't know what she touched while she was in that system." Julian was quiet for a moment. Dominic noticed and settled more comfortably into the chair. "I'll look into it," Julian said. "Good," Dominic stood, "and I'd recommend keeping her away from any further access for everyone's protection." He left. Julian turned back to his screen, and despite himself, despite every instinct that told him the math of Willa's story was too clean, too specific, too correct to be fabricated, a small, stubborn doubt had taken root. He didn't go looking for her that afternoon. The Crestview Capital investors arrived Thursday for a formal presentation. Julian's management team was assembled in the first-floor ballroom. Projector, prepared slides, 4-course lunch, every number triple-checked. 15 minutes before they were due to begin, the presentation system went dark. Not a flicker, a total crash. The hotel's integrated AV and data system had locked itself in a conflict loop. The team's best guess, delivered at rising volume over walkie-talkie. Every screen in the room was black. The backup server wasn't responding. Julian stood at the front of the room, smiling at the Crestview delegation as if everything was fine, which it was not. His IT director was on her knees behind the podium. His operations manager was on the phone. Dominic was moving from terminal to terminal with the energy of someone who was trying very hard to look competent. Willa had been assigned to reset the refreshment service during the break. She was refilling the water pitchers when she glanced, without meaning to, at the projection system's error screen, and felt the splinter. She recognized the conflict immediately. The system was trying to load a presentation file from a directory path that no longer existed. Someone had reorganized the server folders without updating the shortcut. The loop was recursive, catastrophically simple, fixable in under 2 minutes. She put down the water pitcher. "Excuse me," she said to the IT director, "the file path." The IT director looked up, stressed to the edge of breaking. "What?" "The shortcut is pointing to an old folder location. If you update the path reference and clear the buffer cache." Willa started to reach for the keyboard. Dominic stepped in front of her. "You don't belong at this terminal." His voice was low and precise. "You are here to refill water. Go refill water." Silence. Every person in the room had heard it. The Crestview delegation had heard it. 3 of Julian's senior directors had heard it. Willa stepped back. Her face didn't change, but her hands did. She set down the pitcher with deliberate care, the way you set something down when you're deciding whether to say anything. Julian had heard it. "Willa," his voice came out quiet, "show them." Dominic turned. "Julian?" "Move." One of the longest seconds of Julian's professional life passed. Then Dominic stepped aside. Willa sat down, updated the directory path, cleared the buffer, restarted the load sequence. 45 seconds. The screens came back on, the presentation loaded, the room breathed. One of the Crestview executives looked at the senior director beside him and said something quietly. The senior director leaned over and translated. "He wants to know if she's on the IT team," the senior director said. "She manages night housekeeping," Julian said. A pause. Then the Crestview executive began to applaud, just once, twice, 3 times, slow and genuine. His colleagues followed. Willa stood up, straightened her uniform, said to Julian, "The refreshments," and went back to the water pitchers. Dominic's jaw was set so tight it looked architectural. 2 days later, Dominic called a staff meeting. He had the access logs. He presented them in the same conference room with Julian and 4 senior directors. Willa was called in last with no warning and stood at the end of the table holding nothing while 7 people looked at her. Dominic had screenshots, system access logs under her employee ID number, late nights, procurement records, vendor databases. He narrated them calmly, the way a man narrates something he's practiced. "This is a pattern of unauthorized access," he said. 7 instances over 2 weeks. Each time she accessed areas far outside her clearance level, and each time she appeared afterward as the one who fixed whatever was wrong. He made the air quotes with 2 fingers. "That is not a coincidence, that is a strategy." Willa said, "I didn't create the shell company." "We only have your word for that. You can check the IP logs for the original entries. They won't match my login." "We're checking." Dominic looked at Julian. "Until then, I recommend suspension." And Julian, who had sat across from Willa in this same conference room and watched her explain double billing like someone reading a splinter from a window, looked at the screenshots, looked at the senior directors, looked at the floor, and said nothing. The silence lasted 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, Willa understood something she'd known for a long time, but had let herself forget. It didn't matter how well she did the work. The work didn't protect her. The chair she sat in protected her, and she was never going to have that chair. "Okay," she said, "I understand." She left. In the hallway she walked fast, not running but close. She pushed the button for the service elevator, and when it opened, she stepped inside and let the doors close, and in the 14 floors between 14 and the ground, she cried once, quietly, and was done. She turned in her badge at the housekeeping office. She went home. That afternoon, a small cardboard box arrived at Julian's office. Inside, a printed copy of every system entry she'd made, annotated with the error she'd been correcting and the original source of the error. A notebook with 6 weeks of handwritten observations about the procurement inconsistencies dated. A printout of the shell company registration showing it had been filed under an address traced to a property trust with an unlisted beneficiary. And a sticky note on top. "I didn't break anything, I only fixed it. I hope someone uses this, WB." Julian sat at his desk and read every page. Then he pulled up the original vendor access logs, not the ones Dominic had presented, but the raw system logs pulled directly from IT, and cross-referenced the IP addresses. The logins under Willa's employee ID had been made from a terminal on the 14th floor executive corridor. Willa worked floors 12 through 16. But the original fraudulent vendor entries, the ones that created the shell company, that rerouted the $3 million, had been made from the executive office suite on floor 17. Dominic's office was on floor 17. Julian closed the laptop. He sat very still for approximately 45 seconds. Then he picked up his phone, called his legal team, called the hotel's forensic accounting firm, and called the FBI field office number that every hotel group CEO hoped they'd never need. Then he got his code. He didn't have her personal number. He got her address from HR after explaining that it was urgent, and that if they asked him to go through proper channels, he was going to have a professional crisis on the spot. He drove to Wicker Park, 6-story walk-up, 3rd floor. He stood outside the building in his work suit and looked at the buzzers. He pressed 3C. Silence. He pressed it again. "Who is it?" Through the crackle. "It's Julian Hargrove." A very long pause. "My name is on the building," he offered. "I know who you are." Another pause. "Why are you here?" "Because I found the proof and I need your help, and I owe you an apology that I'd prefer to give in person rather than through a speaker." The longest pause yet. The buzzer sounded. He walked up 3 flights of stairs. She was standing in the doorway of apartment 3C in an old sweatshirt, arms crossed, and the look on her face was the specific expression of someone who had decided in advance not to be moved, and was not entirely succeeding. "You read the box," she said. I read every page, the IPs from Dominic's terminal, the shell company, the annotated entries. He stopped at the top of the stairwell, slightly out of breath. "He set it up to look like you. When you found it, he tried to frame you with the access logs." Willa was quiet. "I should have defended you in that meeting." He said it plainly, without hedging it. "I didn't, and I am sorry. That is not something I can walk back, and I'm not going to pretend I had a good reason for it, because I didn't." He exhaled. "I was wrong." Willa looked at him for a long moment. "Dominic is planning to accelerate the sale of the procurement division to a third party before the forensic audit can catch up," Julian continued. "He has a buyer meeting scheduled for tomorrow morning. Once the transaction goes through, the paper trail gets buried in the acquisition. So you need me to. I need the annotated documentation you put in the box, presented by you to the auditors, tomorrow morning before that meeting happens." He looked at her directly. "I need you there. And I will not let anyone speak to you the way Dominic spoke to you in that conference room. I promise you that." She studied him, the way she'd studied the spreadsheet, patient, thorough, looking for the error. "Last time you made a promise like that," she said, "you stayed quiet." "I know. So why would I trust this one?" He didn't have a clean answer. He thought about it for a second, actually thought, didn't just reach for a smooth corporate response, and said, "You probably shouldn't, not yet. But I'm asking you to come anyway." Willa looked out toward the stairwell window, the city beyond it, gray and cold and indifferent. "I'm not doing this for the job," she said finally. "I know. I'm doing it because Dominic should not get to walk away with $3 million and a clean record while I have a suspension on file." "Agreed. And if you stay quiet again, I won't." Another long moment. Then she uncrossed her arms, stepped back from the doorway. "I need 15 minutes. The next morning at 7:45, Willa stood in front of the Crestview forensic auditors and Julian's full board and walked them through every entry in the annotated records. She spoke the way she cleaned. Methodical, grid pattern, no wasted motion. She showed the IP evidence. She showed the shell company registration. She showed the timeline. Dominic tried to object twice. Julian stopped him both times with 2 words, "Sit down." By 9 o'clock, the FBI agents who had arrived quietly through the service entrance were walking Dominic Frey through the lobby in handcuffs. The board sat in silence. Julian stood at the front of the room. The person who identified this fraud, documented it at personal cost, and still showed up this morning to make sure it was proven, is standing at the back of this room. Her name is Willa Bauer. She has worked at this hotel for 6 years without anyone thinking to ask what she was capable of. That is a failure of this organization, and it is a failure that starts with me. He looked directly at her. She looked back at him from the doorway, still in the navy sweater, having not had time to go home and change. Several board members began to applaud. Willa did not know what to do with her hands. Later, much later, after the auditors had finished and the legal team had arrived and the board had dispersed, Julian found her in the 14th floor corridor, sitting on a windowsill with a coffee she'd gotten from the break room, looking out at the Chicago skyline. "You can have your badge back," he said. "Today if you want. I'll think about it." He sat down on the other end of the windowsill. They both looked out at the city for a moment. "The job offer I mentioned," he said. "Operations analyst. You'd have actual clearance this time for the systems you've been auditing from the hallway for 2 years, and a desk. With a good chair? Ergonomic, adjustable." Willa looked at her coffee cup. She turned the handle slightly to the left, then back to the right, then left it where it felt correct. Julian noticed her do it and did not ask why. "I want to think about it," she said. "The job." "Okay. But I'll come back." She glanced at him sideways. "The linen closet on 12 is still 3 sheets short of the inventory count. It's been bothering me since Tuesday." Julian almost laughed. "I believe you. And someone on 16 has been over-ordering amenity kits by a case every 2 weeks. Not fraud, just bad counting, but still." "Still," he agreed. She looked out at the skyline. He looked at her. "Just for a moment, the way you look at something you'd almost lost before you understood what it was." "Thank you," he said, "for the box you left, the notes, all of it." Willa was quiet. "Then I wasn't sure you'd read it." "I read everything." She nodded slowly. Turned the coffee handle 1 more degree, left it there. 3,214,000, she said. "And change. Found by a housekeeper with a cleaning cloth in her pocket." "And 6 years of watching," Julian said, "and 4 accounting courses, and a very specific kind of stubbornness." She looked at him again. The city moved below them, indifferent and enormous, doing what cities do. "I'll come back Monday," she said. "We can talk about the job." "Monday," he agreed. She stood, picked up her coffee. He walked beside her to the elevator. They stood there for a moment in the kind of silence that had already decided something, even if neither of them had said it yet. She pressed the button. The elevator opened. "Your collar," she said, not looking at him, "left side." He reached up, found it, fixed it. "Thank you." "It's a problem," she said. "I can't help it." The elevator doors closed. Julian stood alone in the corridor, his hand still at his collar, looking at nothing in particular. He thought about Monday. He thought it couldn't come fast enough.